And we welcome you in to the Dog Bowl in Berea. This is episode 4 of the best podcast available, and it is time to preview the 2020 NFL Combine. I'm Jason Gibbs alongside Brown Senior Staff Writer Andrew Gribble. And Gribbs, it is finally here, the annual trek to Indianapolis. Good food, Kilroy's, and oh, by the way, the NFL Scouting Combine.
Yeah, and it's for a lot of us Combine veterans. I mean, this will be my 8th in a row, dating back to my time covering the SEC, and this is going to be a wrench into the system because the Combine has gone big time, and it already had gone big time these last few years. Especially when you talk to coaches about what this thing used to be like and just how casual everything used to be. I mean, now the whole day is changed to cater to TV, which I understand. I mean, this is. You don't want to have a premium product airing on a Saturday morning, which is what it has. And for the NFL.
And the biggest day was Saturday.
The NFL wants to have an event every month where they have big eyes on them. And the Combine is what it is for late February, early March for the NFL. So from a TV standpoint, this all made sense. That's why this thing's gone to prime time for Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday into Sunday. It's just it totally changes things from people like us where now we're waking up really early to talk to these guys at 8 a.m. Start time for all these players, which actually is better because I like getting it all knocked out instead of waiting 8 hours to talk to half the guys you want to talk to. But and then everything happens at night. So I almost wonder how the staffs navigate this kind of situation because they're used to doing something completely different and managing their days because there's so much more that these guys are doing beyond watching these guys on the field. Because honestly, they don't need to be there for that. It's all the other stuff that they need to be in Indianapolis for.
Well, the interviews, they've expanded from 15 minutes to 18 minutes, but they've cut back on the number of guys, 60 to 45.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you really have to know who you're going to be talking to. And you've got to whittle that list down. And there's a lot of guys at the NFL Combine. And it will be interesting to see. It's going to be early mornings, and it's going to be late nights. Yeah. Because you do a lot of networking, and you talk to scouts, you talk to coaches, you talk, at nighttime at dinners, you run into guys, and it's getting information. It's getting stuff from players' agents about potential players, current players on rosters, and players, that are going to be drafted potentially by your football team. And now you're going to have nighttime workouts. So where does all that fit into play before this is all said and done?
I think all the coaches and everyone, they know what the deal is, though. I mean, this is part of being in the big business of the NFL, so you're going to have to adjust to that schedule because I don't think there's any – you're not going to convince the people that make big TV decisions that this needs to go back because it ruins our the day-to-day.
I was going to say.
So it's just this is the way it's going to be, and now – you have even more exposure for the Combine, and I do wonder. We haven't heard all this really does come down to is quarterback workouts, and sometimes whatever position group, maybe it's DBs or other ones that run the fastest 40s. Those are the ones that are going to get the most eyeballs. I do wonder if, say, Joe Burrow decides not to throw. We haven't heard either way if he's going to. You lose him, and you're not going to have two out there. So that hurts the appeal of the event. An ideal time would have been to do this a couple years ago when you had all those quarterbacks at the top of the draft.
Yeah,
that's when this would have done really well in its debut. But you go with the hand you got. It's a good draft class. I hope people are digging into all the offensive tackle footage that we'll be breaking down. So I hope they get just as excited about that stuff as we are going to have to be because you just can't find anyone talking about the Browns at the number 10 pick and not talking about a tackle.
All right, coming up on today's podcast, it is our Combine preview show. We'll be joined by the special teams coach of your Cleveland Browns, Mike Priefer. He sat down with Gribbs and with Nathan Zagura, who makes his 2020 BPA debut. So we get to know a little bit about the process that he takes when it comes to looking at various players and getting ready for the draft, and a little bit about how he worked out the Scottish Hammer and some of those little tidbits from last year's draft in finding two rookie kickers that were highly successful for this football team. In addition, former Browns offensive lineman John GRECO will join us to talk about his Combine experience. We did this last year. You did a great thing with Joe Thomas And it was a nice little insight into what players go through, the mindset you have to have, not just from the combine, but all the way through to the draft. And it's one of those things where what's his advice for the guys coming out in this year's draft? So a lot to get to on this week's Best Podcast available. You said it. You've been covering this 8 years now. You've been to 8 of these. Is there a memory that stands out? Is there anything that stands out from prior NFL combines?
Yeah, from a media perspective, I don't think it gets any weirder or bigger than the Manti Te'o press conference. I think that was that was a big deal, and that was so strange. And the types of questions he was getting asked, I mean, they were all over the map. I mean, it was where the combine used to be in basically the concourse of Lucas Oil, and it was just a full room of people, and it was really his first time to face the music on the entire thing, and it was kind of tough to sit through. I mean, as someone who I didn't have to do anything with it. I actually was covering Alabama that year, and his last game happened against Alabama, and he wasn't very good in it. So maybe for his sake, he didn't have to answer any questions about that. It was all about the other stuff. But yeah, that was definitely the most bizarre thing. I will put second most bizarre thing that's happened, nothing that we saw firsthand, but the Reuben Foster stuff from a couple years ago at the Combine. Then he just got booted.
He was there one day, and the next day he was gone.
Yeah, there was some kind of conflict or something that went down with that.
Yeah.
So that was a strange Combine happening. I mean, it is kind of all this stuff kind of runs together because it becomes a big deal for that moment, and then you kind of move on. I mean, the Manti Te'o thing was big when it happened, but then once that guy got in the NFL, people didn't really talk about him much anymore. He was just kind of an average linebacker, and so this is the big moment. Maybe a third place was when Mitch Trubisky was going to potentially go by Mitchell at a name tag. That was an odd time to debut that. It was kind of an unfortunate circumstance for him because I don't think he was asking for that. They just kind of put that on his name card. So you always have little things here and there, but the fact that you always have thousands of media members that are covering every step of the way, I mean, that's where it is interesting. But I think the other side of it is when you have the media session with just the college players, that's when you get like the diehards in there that are asking these guys like stuff that's way over my head, like fits in offensive schemes, what you did here, here, and here. I mean, that's where the nitty-gritty is. But the big NFL news, that's going to come all Tuesday when every coach and GM is talking, though.
Yeah, speaking of gauntlets, we're looking at 64 guys, essentially, unless you have a team that has just a coach. Maybe
coaches,
like the
coaches
Patriots.
can choose not to do it.
Yeah.
I think Bill Belichick and Sean Payton have chosen not to do this media session before. So it's not mandatory.
Correct.
Strongly encouraged. Frowned upon if you don't, but no ramifications.
I know our two guys will be talking.
Yes.
So Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski will talk. I do want to get your thoughts on what happened. Meet the Coordinator Day was this week here in Berea. We were able to finally get a chance to talk to Alex Van Pelt and Joe Woods, also to Mike Priefer. Your takeaways from Van Pelt and from Woods?
Well, I mean, there was very little surprises on my end because I've already I talked to a lot of these guys at length, and especially with Priefer, he said a lot of the same things he did with me. I appreciate. Let's start with Priefer because we talked to him later, and he elaborates on this in the interview. Is just he is frank, I think, in assessing. He knows that this team very much improved on special teams last year. There's no denying that. I think he's proud of that. I also think it's interesting in how just flat out he lays it out. This team wasn't good enough returning kicks and punts, and to me, as much as this was kind of a combined effort with the coverage units and the returners, this to me wonders if we're talking about a special teams point of focus going into the combine, I start looking at guys who can be potential returners for this team. Because I don't know if your kickoff returner or punt returner is on this team yet for this season. So that's an area where if you're looking for potential, if you're going to draft someone that's their best thing to do, you're probably looking at day 3. So that's where I think he's trying to identify who can best maximize his improved special teams and make more of these kickoff and punt returns. Because, even though the units didn't turn the ball over, which is a victory compared to previous years of the Browns, you only really had one memorable good return the entire season, and that was Dontrell Hilliard's against the Seahawks to open the game. So you got to do more with that. He's not using the new kickoff rules as an excuse. So I would look at, for a special teams perspective, identifying a return man, and I think he's gone over and over again on that topic. Alex Van Pelt, to me, the transparency in which he discussed the potential areas of improvement with Baker Mayfield, I thought was very interesting, going into details about the footwork. And I think the transparency with the identity of this Browns offense, I think it's pretty clear, laying it out what this team's going to be all about. And I think that's good news for Nick Chubb, good news for Kareem Hunt, and I think good news for your wide receivers. Because if you look at both what Stefanski did in Minnesota and what this team was good at last year, you don't necessarily look at big-time production out of more than 2 receivers. You look at Diggs, Thielen. That's what essentially you might be looking at for Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. And then the Baker Mayfield stuff was really interesting, just working on footwork out of the shotgun, identifying areas in which he can improve, and knowing that the skill set is in there where they can get more out of him. And you look back at last year as kind of an aberration.
Well, and he also said, I'm not worried about the play calling. We'll figure that out as we go. I think they're still feeling things out, and I think on that coaching staff they're getting to know each other.
Yeah.
So and figuring out who's going to be the best fit to do that. But I don't see a lot of egos in that room, and I think whoever is calling plays are going to be – everybody else is going to be pretty comfortable with who's in charge of doing it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good reflection on Kevin Stefanski looking at that offensive coaching staff, because you've got two of the biggest figures on that offensive staff are guys he's really never coached with. And I think that shows that he went out trying to get the best possible people for the group. But there are 2 people who obviously respect him, but they've never worked alongside him, with both Alex Van Pelt and Bill Callahan. And then you have some familiar faces with Chad O'Shea and Drew Petzing, who he worked with in Minnesota. So it's a good mixed group where you're not just bringing in all the guys you know. You're trying to bring in the best possible minds. And I think Van Pelt jumping at this opportunity with the ability to be a coordinator but not being guaranteed that he was going to call plays, I think and he's doing it with a head coach that he's never worked with. I think that's a good sign for how this job appealed to coaches outside the organization.
And Joe Woods?
Yeah, very good. Obviously an affable guy. You guys had him on CBD earlier on Wednesday, and I thought he's someone that I think he comes from winning. I think you need that winning pedigree. That he was just with the 49ers. He knows how it's done. He won a Super Bowl in Denver. I like that he's adjusting basically his scheme to fit the personnel, because I don't think anyone was going to want to go through a 3-4 switch and us talking ourselves into Myles Garrett, the outside linebacker, for an entire offseason.
No.
So I think that's good, even though it sounds like he can do both. He might be even more well-versed in the 3-4 based on what he did in Denver. But I think it was clear to me in a couple of his answers he was being really cautious in talking about guys, because he realizes he's only been on the job for a couple weeks. Some of these offensive guys have been here much longer. He was busy coaching in a Super Bowl. His staff is finally finalized. I think the last addition being Brandon Lynch, the assistant defensive backs coach. But the one thing I'll go back to with what he said in his interview with me was the one lesson he might have learned in Denver when he was a coordinator there that he's going to apply here was he thought he took too much of a big picture look as a coordinator and left his comfort zone a little bit too much, left the DBs, the defensive backs, an area where he's strong at. He left that maybe go more than he was comfortable with. Now I think he's going to be more involved. So you have him, Jeff Howard, and Brandon Lynch really involved with your defensive backfield that, barring what you do in free agency and the draft, is going to have a much different look with what you're doing at safety.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it. His job right now is to look at guys that there's a question about.
Yeah,
you know,
those are the first priorities.
Yeah, I mean, if someone asked him about Mac Wilson, and he said, I've watched a little bit of Mac, but I know Mac's going to be here.
Yeah.
So I'm not – I got to figure out what else we have here. And guys that may or may not be here, figure out if they want him or don't want him.
Yeah, and I think that defensively you got a big decision at each area of the field. And I think you've already made one with T.J. Carey. He's no longer here. But defensive line, it's a decision involving Olivier Vernon going into a big year for him. Linebackers, Joe Schobert. DBs, Demarius Randall. I mean, those are 3 big players on this defense on whether or not you have the option to bring back or not. And, you know, that those are decisions that will be made in the coming months that I'm sure Joe Woods is going to be consulted on. But ultimately, those are decisions that are made above him, and he has to work with what he's got and adjust accordingly.
All right, so coming up, we will talk to former Browns offensive lineman John Greco about his combine experiences, his advice to the guys going through that process and those experiences this year. That comes up in just a few minutes. But first and foremost, Mike Priefer. you can make a movie about the guy's life, I feel like. Andrew Gribble and Nathan Zagura had a chance to sit down with Priefer after Meet the Coordinator Day concluded. We're going to throw to that interview, and then we'll rejoin you on the other side with John Greco. Enjoy it on the best podcast available.
Thanks, Gibbs. Very happy to be joined by one of our good friends, special teams coordinator Mike Priefer. And, Coach, listen, when regimes change, there's sometimes not a lot of holdover. 3 coaches stay from last year's staff, 2 of them. Special teams, you and Doug Coleman, your assistant there.
Right.
Obviously, you have some history with Kevin Stefanski. So when you heard he got the job, kind of how did that all go down that resulted in what I could tell you all Browns fans are happy with, and so are we, that you are still here as a special teams coordinator?
I'm very fortunate, obviously, that we're still here. Our guys played hard for us on teams last year. I think that had a lot to do with it. I think if we would have played poorly or if we would have been disorganized and had a bunch of penalties and just didn't do well overall, I don't think it would have been hard for Kevin to keep myself and Doug around. But I thought we played hard. Our guys did a good job for us. We got better every week. We improved, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So I'm excited about, where we're at. And, when Kevin got the job, obviously I was very, very pleased. I believe if Kevin would have got the job a year ago, I would have gone with him because, we talked about before my contract had run out in Minnesota. I was looking for a place to go. And it just so happens that, Freddie hired me and I can't really pinpoint all the things that went wrong or what went wrong specifically, but, at the end of the day, it was sad to see some good people go, the good people that left our staff, good friends of mine. And, Freddie was good to me. John was good to me. But like you said, there's a new regime. I'm excited about the future of our team. I think we got a lot of talent on our team. We got a lot of talented coaches that we've hired. And I think Kevin did a good job of assembling our staff, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
What's something that you learned about Kevin when you guys were together in Minnesota that you think will serve him well as he's kind of really risen the ranks now to a head coach in the NFL?
Yeah, it's funny. When I got there, I think he was quality control, and then he became, an assistant, I think with tight ends and then running backs, and I might have the order messed up, and then quarterbacks and then offensive coordinator. And, every step of the way, you just saw him take on a new challenge, and I thought he did a great job. He's very poised. He's very confident. He's very humble. Works extremely hard, good head on his shoulders, very intelligent. I don't think Penn is as good a school as the U.S. Naval Academy, but at the end of the day, I think he's got a good education. But I mean, he's well groomed. He's prepared for this, and I know he's been preparing for this his whole career, and now he's got a shot, and I hope to help him win a lot of games here.
Now, you made the decision to come back pretty early in this whole process, and Kevin announced that. What's it been like seeing the staff kind of come together, even in these last few days as the defensive staff's getting rounded out?
Last year, obviously being one of the newer guys, we came in. I came in, and it was a little bit different deal. I had to learn the whole team. I had to learn the rest of the guys on the staff, and I had to hire an assistant, and so there was a lot more going on. This year, we ended the year like we normally end the year. We evaluated our team. Doug and I did a lot of work on where we need to go and evaluating what we did schematically, and so we were ahead of the game where we were a year ago. And then seeing the new staff and the new guys coming in, they're scrambling, trying to look at our team and to learn our defense and offensive personnel. And a lot of them have asked me and picked my brain a little bit about what I've thought about our players and our locker room and the chemistry and what we need, where we need to go from here. So it's a little different perspective, been here for a year. But I like our staff. I think we got a bunch of good guys that are good people, that are good football coaches, and we're ready to roll.
And this staff, you look through it, the connections that are everywhere. And I know you have some connections with this staff, if you could share for the listeners, because a lot of people have touched each other at different times, different organizations in their careers to make it to this point to be the 2020 Cleveland Brown staff.
Sure. Well, like you said, Nathan, I've known Kevin since 2011. We were together 8 years at Minnesota, and Joe Woods was there at the time, so I was with Joe for 3 years, and Jeff Howard, I think, for 5 years, and obviously Doug was with me last year, and Stump, and I think there's a lot of connections from the San Francisco staff with Joe, and bringing in Chris, and then of course he knew Jason, that he's worked with Jason before, Jason Tarver. So there's a lot of different connections. I'm sure I'm missing a few in there, but there's so many. I'm trying to focus on getting ready for the combine, and so I'm watching a lot of tape and being prepared for that.
What goes into it? What's different about going into a second season with the same team, same kind of personnel than it was maybe last year when you come in and just trying to install a kind of a brand new message for those guys?
The exciting thing for me, Andrew, is that we have a new kicker and a new punter. I mean, obviously they got a year under their belt, and that's different than a year ago. I thought they came in and had to beat out two very good players, and they did. And I think they excelled and they got better. And like I've told you guys and the media before, and our fans before around here, that those guys are just scratching the surface. They're going to be very, very good, and there's a reason to hope and reason to believe that we're going to continue to improve at the punter and kicker position. And I think our returners did a good job last year. I think we have a lot of room to grow there, whether we bring in new people or get the guys better that we already have. I think that's going to be my challenge, is to find the right guys, find the right mixture, the right chemistry, and work with Andrew and Kevin and get the best guys in here.
So when you get ready for a combine, you said you've been watching a lot of tape.
Right.
What does that entail? And you mentioned you've got your kicker and your punter, so that's a little bit different. That's maybe something. Of course, you're going to be aware of who's out there, but not something that has to be a focus. I would imagine as special teams coordinator, you have to watch all the linebackers, all the safeties, watch all these different people, because those are the guys that are ultimately going to end up with you on special teams, especially early in their careers.
Sure, absolutely. I will be there for the whole week, and I'm going to get as many informal interviews accomplished that I can. And obviously all the kickers, the 3 kickers, the 7 punters, the 2 snappers, we'll interview them. We always have to have a list ready, even though we think we have the right guys at the snapper, kicker, and punter positions. We always have to evaluate everybody who's out there. If one of them turns an ankle, something happens, they got to miss a week or two, and there's a guy on the street ready. Did I interview him last year? Did I interview him 2 years ago? What did he, how did he do? Where's he been? He comes in for a workout. I already have a relationship with these guys. I think that helps. I think my main focus this year will be obviously continue to help the bottom end of the roster, and in terms of the positions you said, Nathan, the safeties, the linebackers, the defensive ends, tight ends, running backs, fullbacks, getting those guys. Help us, cornerbacks, of course, and getting them to help us win a lot of games on special teams like they did this year at times. And then I think the other main focus will be the returner position. We really, I'm hitting those hard right now. I've got all the specialists ready, the 12 guys that are going to the combine. I'm ready to go with those guys, and I'm about halfway through the returner list. And I'll finish that up this week and be ready for the combine.
What do you look for in a returner? Because obviously that was the one thing I think everybody, and you've said, our coverage was, I think, excellent, both punts and kickoffs, some of the best in the NFL, but you didn't get the big plays you wanted out of the return game. So what is it that you're looking for in a returner, and what do you as a special teams coordinator think about having a guy who's, that's his job? Some of the best to do it were, wide receiver hybrids, but they were truly returners.
Sure. I've coached a bunch of different types, the big, strong kickoff returners like a Cordero Patterson, and a smaller, quicker guy like Marcus Sherrills. And then last year we had Dontrell Hilliard and Dearness Johnson step up for us and did a nice job. Tavier Thomas did a little bit for us. I think Jarvis Landry had a few returns for us on punt return. So at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is a guy that's courageous. Punt return. Let's talk punt return first. So courageous, catch the ball in the crowd. He's got great tracking techniques, which means he can get to the spot. No whether it's over his head, is it in front of him, is it left, is it right? Can he get to that spot under control? How are his catching mechanics, his elbows, his eyes, his stance? How wide is his base? All those little things that we teach. We may not see that a lot on college tape because they're not being coached that as much, because there's so many other things that a college coach has to do with recruiting and coaching a position and all that. So obviously it's my job to help coach these returners up. So, at the end of the day, we're looking for tracking mechanics, we're looking for catching mechanics, we're looking for courage, we're looking for speed, explosiveness, quickness. Can he make that first guy miss? How big is he? How strong is he? Can he break the arm tackles? What kind of decisions does he make? I don't just watch the returns. I watch the ones that hit the ground. How does he react? The fair catches, the inside the 50, inside the 20 type punts. How does he react? Does he bluff? Does he fair catch too early? Does he catch the ball at the 2-yard line because he has no awareness? Those are all the type of things I'm looking for, and I'm taking notes on all these guys and then ranking them, comparing them, and kind of going from there.
So you mentioned, so that's the film aspect. You also said you want to do a bunch of informal interviews.
Absolutely.
What is the number one thing you're trying to understand when you get a chance to sit down with somebody?
Can I tell in 15 minutes if a guy loves football? That's my main focus. If a guy loves the game and he's a good enough player to play in this league, we got a shot. If he if he talks about money, if he talks about fame, if he talks about glory, if he talks about just about him as a person in terms of his accomplishments, and maybe a little selfish in that regard, I'm looking for a team guy that loves the game of football. If you got a team guy that loves the game of football and they're good enough to play in this league, we're going to have a pretty good player on our hands.
I'll ask you to kind of go back in time a little bit. Where were Austin and Jamie on your radar at this time last year?
I knew a lot about Austin, had already evaluated him. I thought he was one of the top 2 kickers. He and Matt Gay from Utah were the top 2 kickers going into the combine. Coming out of the combine, I thought the same thing. I knew both of them would be drafted. I did not know much about Jamie prior to the combine. After the combine, I watched him on tape. Personnel guys said you need to go down and work him out after we saw him at the Zahner workout. He did a great job at the Zahner workout, which is coming up, I think, in the second week in March, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So it really was kind of maybe about 6 weeks prior to the draft when we finally started really looking at Jamie. And then I went down and worked him out down in Pine Bluff and had a great workout, great interview. And he came up here on a top 30 visit, and he said, hey, we're going to take a chance with this kid as a free agent, and the sky's the limit.
Is that one of the stories that, because I know that the coaching circles are very tight, that the other special teams coordinators are like, man, I can't believe you guys found this guy, and look at what you've done. Was that one that other coordinators get excited about? Because I'm sure that's the story. That's what you're looking for.
Sure. Well, a couple guys have said that to me, but, they didn't really know much about him, and, I didn't either. And it was our personal guys last year that said, hey, we think we got one here. Why don't you go down and check him out? And I did, and it was obviously a trip that was well worth it, and I enjoyed myself down there. They got a great coaching staff, a good bunch of guys, and obviously Jamie did a good job for us. And I like his mentality. I like his attitude. I texted him the other day. He was in Scotland visiting his grandmother, and he hadn't seen her in a couple of years. So these young guys keep me young. They'll drive me crazy. They'll keep me young, that's for sure.
What are some things you can see in players while you're watching them on film, even if they don't do a lot of special teams in college because they're maybe some of the star players on their
Right.
teams? What are some qualities you look for to maybe for those core team guys out there?
Toughness.
Yeah.
I'm looking for physical toughness. You don't know mentally tough if they can rebound from a tough game or a tough series. I'm looking for if they're disciplined, if they're like a linebacker, is he going to be in his gap? I don't know exactly what they're taught all the time, but I can tell a little bit. I know enough about defense that I can tell if he's in his gap or not. Does he take chances? Does he turn his head when he's tackling? How does he tackle? How does he change direction? How does he flip his hips? Like I'm talking about defensive player. Obviously a running back, vision. You're looking for vision as a returner or a running back, a receiver. How does he run after a catch? Does he have good hands? Is he courageous? Will he go over the middle? Will he make those tough plays? So there's a lot of different factors at a lot of different positions that I look for that can translate over to special teams.
What are you hoping to see at the combine when you evaluate these people, or is it more for you about the interview as opposed to maybe the measurables and seeing them run or seeing them move?
Yeah, I'd like to see them move and run a little bit and work out in person because you see more than you would on tape. I also like to see him to respond to adversity. Like if a guy has a bad rep and say a linebacker's a bad rep through the bags or whatever, and I'm kind of watching him and how does he react? What's his body language like? Can I get to know him a little bit that way? And of course the interviews. That's probably for me. That's the biggest thing because the rest of the stuff you can evaluate off tape. You can get all the measurables. I don't even sit there and time them. I just watch and somebody else might have it or they'll put it up on the screen, but he ran the 40 and I might jot it down for my own reference. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit there and time every guy because there's thousands of guys doing that at the combine.
Is there a speed that you want, like in your mind, when you say for a returner, I want them to be able to hit this speed, or because it's not necessarily straight line, right? You're veering and cutting and, all of that.
The big thing we talk about is on a kickoff, as a kickoff returner or a punt returner, do they make moves on the move? In other words, is he covering ground and changing direction at the same time? If he's got to stop and change direction, stop, change direction, that's not the kind of guy you want. You want a guy that can avoid, that can break tackles, that can make moves on the move, that that kind of the quickness that he has, he can make people miss in a phone booth. You've heard that term before. Those are the type of guys, especially as a punt returner, that you're looking for.
What is the biggest change you've seen at the combine since you started coaching?
I think now the schedule is going to be a big change for us. I think the media and how the coverage, the TV. I mean, my first combine was 2002. So this is what, my 19th combine? Wow, it makes me feel old. But I've been going every year for 19 years, and I think the biggest thing is the last several years is that the NFL Network and putting everything on TV and all the media and all the coverage that it has. And I mean, the NFL Combine beats sometimes playoff basketball. I mean, it's unbelievable the coverage that it has. So it's a tribute to our league and what the NFL, the league has done, and what you guys do to promote the game and to promote the good things in the game, which is always fun.
All right, I want to get a little veer here. The XFL has a pretty interesting kickoff rule and setup, and I don't know how much you've watched that, but as you know, the NFL is constantly looking to evolve kickoffs, and we've talked about this, with some of the NFL rules, but basically what they do is they put the guy kicking the balls in the same spot he would be for us. the coverage team starts at the other team's 35.
Mm-hmm.
The blockers, I think, are either at their own 25 or own 30.
I
so
saw
that's
the
a very
picture
short.
of it. Yeah, I haven't seen it though.
And it's actually led to some cool returns. You don't have necessarily the high impact, but as you see this game evolve, and obviously the special team coordinator, kicks and punts are going to always be very, very important to you.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of maybe see that evolving?
Some of that stuff is gadgets. I'm not really into gadgets. I'm kind of an old school type guy. I mean, I was the one I was really upset when they outlawed the wedge.
Oh, I'm
back
sure
in
you were.
2011 because we were good at it. Excuse me, but at the end of the day, it's some of the stuff. The safety. I'm always for safety. Always for safety. So the way we coach, the way we teach blocking, the way we teach tackling, the way we teach taking on a block separation, keeping the head out of the game as much as we can. So I like the game evolving from the training and coaching and teaching aspect of it, rather than throwing out new rules and doing this, that, or the other. The big thing I think we're going to look at this year is the success rate of the onside kicks, which is so low right now. We may have to do something a little bit differently, because when you don't get a running start, at the 34-yard line, and you only have 5 guys over there, it's hard to get onside kicks. And I think one of the things we're going to have to figure out is try, maybe tweak it a little bit, that where a certain situation you can say, okay, we're going to onside kick it here, so you can use a different formation, or you can have more of a running start, and then if you don't kick the onside kick, then you get penalized, whatever the case may be. I mean, it's one of the rules I would suggest that we kind of make a change or tweak, that you can
give you a chance.
Well, you have better than an 8% chance. It used to be like 24, 25%, whatever. Now it's like 8 or 9%, which is obviously not very high. And I don't even know the exact percentage. I just know that it's very difficult to get. And I think, that's really the only problem I have, is the success rate of the onside kick. Everything else, the kickoff return, I think the rules have changed, have helped, and the concussions have gone down the last year since we tweaked the rule or changed the rule. And I kind of like where we're at right now, going in that direction.
Do you think we'll ever see somebody be able to do on a consistent basis what Devin Hester was able to do ever again?
Well, Devin, it was unique. I mean, Devin's a Hall of Famer in my book.
With the rule, it almost seems like with the rule change, there's so many more faster guys that are on the field that it's harder to get as many of those big returns. You just around the league, you just don't see them as much as you did maybe in that kind of.
But you don't get as many opportunities because there's too many guys with touchbacks. I mean, you have the kickers now. They're like, okay, we're not kicking to Devin. I wouldn't want to kick to Devin.
Sure.
I mean, I was kicking with Ryan Longwell from the 30-yard line. Ryan tried his best, but he was an older guy that couldn't kick touchbacks a lot. Indoors it was easier, but outdoors it was tough. At Chicago, or when we played him at home, trying to kick touchbacks. But at the end of the day, I think. When we had Cordero Patterson, we put him 9 deep in the end zone, and we brought everything out. We didn't care. Now, touchbacks were at the 20 back then, so maybe it's a little bit more of a factor. If you got to the 18 or 19 or 20-yard line, obviously it's a loss of 5, 6, 7 yards. So, when you have that type of return, you're going to take more opportunities. You're going to take it out of the end zone. You're scare a lot of people. And when you play in Cleveland, Ohio, or Cincinnati, Ohio, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Baltimore, Maryland, you're going to have a lot of wind and weather, and you can't always kick touchbacks. So that's why I'm excited about being in an outdoor venue, an outdoor stadium, and our division's all outdoors. And so sometimes you're going to have to kick. So we get a good returner. Here we go. And I know we're going to cover well. So now we're going to get a good returner in here, or continue growing the guys that we have here and getting them better, and then we'll take advantage of that situation.
Special thanks to Nathan Zagura for making his debut on the BPA for 2020. Andrew Gribble as well with some outstanding work. Coach Priefer, no shortage of opinions on things, and feels pretty strongly about where his game is and where his team is from a special team standpoint. Obviously knows that he's got to take that next step here in 2020.
Yeah, and I know he hasn't tuned into the XFL yet. Maybe he will this weekend. But you better believe that there are people in this organization watching these games. Because you remember last year, how many AAF guys were on the 90-man roster by the time training camp began? I think the playing level was a little bit higher in the XFL than the AAF. So I'm sure, based on some of these guys' contract situations, I don't know if they're able to leave the XFL for the NFL. But
I don't know.
I think that there could be some guys that filling out some training camps, especially that one quarterback. Was it P.J. Walker? He's good.
He's made a name for himself.
Yeah, he'll have a job in August. So I think a lot of these guys could be guys that Mike Priefer could be getting to know as potential special teams options in 2020.
Yeah, indeed. And we appreciate Coach's time. As always, all the coaches right now super busy just trying to get ready for the NFL Combine. We go to the hotline. You see the picture up behind us. The one and only John Greco, former Browns offensive lineman, and a gentleman who we wanted to bring on here on our NFL Combine preview show to talk about his Combine experiences, to talk about what he went through, to talk about the whole draft process and all that encompasses that for a player. I don't want to call you a kid when you're getting that process because you're an adult, but John, it is a whirlwind tour, and basically your first time off after your college football season ends is the following year when the NFL season ends and your rookie year ends. So talk a little bit, what's that process like leading up to the NFL Combine? What was it like for you as you got ready to leave college and go on to the NFL?
For me, it was, like you said, kind of a whirlwind where, you really don't have any time off. You're going through all these uncharted waters, and, really the only people that are giving you any kind of guidance are whether it's former teammates or friends that are in the NFL that can kind of give you some advice, or if you have a mentor, which I didn't necessarily have. And then you really have your agents and then, your parents. So, you're going through things and you're training. I went down to Florida and I did the, pre-combine training where, really you're in the best shape of your life. You're on a set diet regimen where they give you all of your meals, your pre-workouts and your post-workout shakes, and, you're working out twice a day, and you're really strict on it. And you could definitely see the results because you're taking these tests at the combine, these physical tests, and you're training for the bench, you're training for the 40, and all the things that go into those things, your start, your stride, your finish. And, I know for offensive line, it wasn't, the 40 wasn't going to blow anyone away, but, it was important to try to get a couple extra reps on your bench press, and anything you could to pad your stats to make your product look that much better for these teams.
Yeah, John, I was going to ask, how many times after the combine did you do some of those things? Like, how many times did you run a 40 after the combine, and how many times did you try to bench that? I mean, how especially for an offensive lineman, how ridiculous is maybe some of the stuff that you have to do that you end up never having to do for the rest of your career?
I mean, the 40, the vert, all of that is ridiculous. It's to answer your question, zero. And unless I was betting a guy that I can run a faster 40 or race a guy. And I've yet to run a 40 since the combine. And as far as the benching, I think it is a good test because it does test endurance as well as power, because 225 is light for a lot of guys, especially big guys. So they want to see your endurance. What I was always told for that is, you really can't screw that up unless you do under maybe 20. If you're like a guy that does 12 to 15, that's going to raise a red flag. Offensive linemen should do more than that. And then really anything after that, anything over that is just gets the scouts and teams and GMs excited if you just stack up your numbers. But to answer your question, not one time. But I think the on-field work, the drills that you do with the different offensive line coaches and then your peers, the other guys that are going through with you. You did the mirror drill, you do the 3-cone, some of the quick agility, the footwork things. I thought that translated because it was more realistic drill things. You're not out there blocking guys and driving them down, but it really got to have you out there and do kind of O-line specific footwork, which I think carries over.
John, do you remember your bench reps or 40 time?
I did, yeah. I had 30 bench reps. My combine 40 was like a 5.3, and then at my pro day at Toledo, I ran a 5.1, which maybe a little bit generous stopwatches there at the old alma mater, but it was a different running surface too, so I think that helped. But that's the thing; they take your fastest time, and it's official at your pro day. So I have it down in the books as a 5.1.
Yeah, the combine time was 5.29 according to Pro Football Reference.
That's pretty good.
That's not bad. I mean, that's
not bad.
The bench reps are up there too. I mean, those are among the best of anyone there. So that's good. Now, and I'll ask, at this stage in the draft process, did you have any sense that you would be a third-round pick, which you ended up being, or when did it come into focus after the combine?
So, as you're going into it, your agent's talking with you, and he's like, look, they have you graded anywhere between 2nd and 5th. And you're like, okay, well, that's obviously a huge difference. So you kind of go into it. You do the drills at the combine. You're there for that whole couple days, and it's really just kind of a, like I said earlier, I used the word whirlwind, because you're being poked and prodded, and you're up on stage, and your underwear, and you get all these guys looking at you, and you're doing your weight and your body fat and all that, and it's nerve wracking, but the nice thing is you're doing it with other guys that are going through the same thing, and you always have that camaraderie. But it is kind of a thing where you're just like, at the same time, this is a little ridiculous, but I felt good about my numbers when I left Indianapolis, going into my pro day, and I chose not to bench my pro day, but I thought that I could better my 40 a little bit, which I did. So I was happy about that. And then at that point there, you're like, listen, I told myself, these coaches saw everything they needed to see on my college tape. They could see that I can run and move and not fall on my face when I'm trying to do drills. So at that point, I did all I needed to do.
Before the combine, had your agent heard any interest, or were there what interest in you was there? And then after the combine, did things pick up? And talk about those next steps immediately after the combine and after your pro day.
Okay, so after all that, you do a couple workouts. I remember working out with for a couple teams. Actually, I think just two. I remember New England worked me out, and a longtime offensive line coach, Dante Scarnecchia, came to Toledo and worked me out. I remember it was really cold, and at that point, I'd taken a few weeks off. I kind of went back, and he and I were on the field, and it's just you and the coach, and he's making me run like 100 different drills, and I was exhausted. So, and then he takes me in the classroom, and we did some things, and then he's like, okay, thank you. There was no feedback, no nothing, just, good luck to you. So I'm just like, man, you're always trying to analyze, like, what did that mean? But I took some visits. I remember going up to Minnesota. I did do a visit to St. Louis where I ultimately got drafted. So you do a couple visits, and you're just kind of waiting to hear from your agent. And, he's kind of keeping you calm and remaining positive because you're excited going through the whole thing. And but the really the idea remained the same. It was kind of like that second through fourth or fifth, which, like I said, is a huge difference because when I got drafted, that was I can't remember if it was the first year where they changed it and they did first and second round on the first night, and then they did all the other rounds the next day. I think that was the first year of them doing that. So it was a little bit different and nerve-wracking, but at the end of the day, I was I think the first or second pick on that second day, and it was great because we woke up, found out, and then it was just like we celebrated the rest of the day.
Now, John, did you know going into the combine that you were not going to be a tackle in the NFL? And was that a thing that was realized at the combine? And what are those conversations like with those teams where you're talking about playing a different position?
So it was kind of a mixed bag. I met with some teams at the combine, just kind of in those one-on-one meetings or group setting meetings. There were meetings where I remember with the Colts, it was just a sports psychologist. So, the gal was talking to me about different things that were totally unrelated to football. So it was kind of unique to see what different teams, their meeting styles were. Some teams you met with the head coach. Some teams you met with the offensive line coach. Some teams you met with the whole offensive staff. But like, getting back to your question, there were certain teams that said, we see you as a tackle, probably a right tackle. And then there were teams that said, we see you more bumping the inside. Are you comfortable with that? And of course you say, oh, absolutely. I'm 100% comfortable with that, even though I probably wasn't at the time. But, you're telling them whatever you need to do to try to make yourself look good. But, yeah, so I think each team had kind of a different vision, no matter where they had you on the board.
What's one question that every team asks, like that the guys going to the combine, what do they need to be prepared to answer?
Man, I think it's different no matter where you play. For me, it was, how do you see yourself? Are you prepared for a different level of competition? I think that was kind of the common theme that I got. I don't know if a guy plays at LSU or a team that sees NFL caliber defensive linemen each week, I don't know if they're actually getting that question. So
Giving the MAC no love. No love.
Yeah, that's the thing. The MAC didn't have a lot of love with the defensive linemen, even though now there's a little bit more guys that are rolling around in the league. But that was the main one I was getting. It just are you prepared? And I don't know if it was kind of a mental thing they were trying to test you, but I just said, hey, listen, I'm ready to dominate whoever's in front of me and help the team win.
What did you have a roommate at the combine? I know that there was a time where they would pair people up. Did you have a roommate horror story?
I did. It wasn't a horror story, but he was a kicker, and I don't remember where he was from. But
wait, you got paired with a kicker?
I got paired with a kicker. So I show up, and I was kind of happy because those guys, I think they went like the day or two before offensive line. I think they get those guys out of the way. So he was he was leaving as I was coming. So I knew kicker. He was quiet. I didn't have to worry about him bothering me and messing up my sleep. But guys, to be honest, that whole experience was, looking back, I kind of laughed because you don't really know what to expect outside of just kind of rumors and what people tell you. And you get in there and you're so nervous and you're trained for so much. And, you might not put up the time you want or the number that you want, and you're beating yourself up about it. And then at the end of the day, none of it really matters. Is 0.2 of a second on your 3-cone going to drop you, 9 spots in the draft or make a team not want to pick you? I don't know. But for me, I kind of sit back and laugh about it now. But no real horror stories with the roommates. I just remember kind of joking with, all the offensive linemen in front of me and everything and in the line because, you're like cattle, especially in that weight room.
Yeah, John. Obviously, offensive tackle is going to be a big point of emphasis for the Browns going into this combine. And I'm just wondering, for people that get to watch this at home during prime time hours, what are things they need to be watching with these offensive tackles? Because obviously, it's not going to be the 40 time, but just what things can help these guys vault their stock or maybe put themselves in a position to be with the Browns.
For tackles in the offensive line room, especially in this combine, like I said earlier, their tape speaks for itself. But somebody that can separate themselves, I think the way they meet, if they can grasp things behind the scenes, because when you meet with these teams, these offensive line coaches, they might have you on a dry erase board, and they might draw up, a basic protection that they do, and they could tell you, okay, here, listen, if we're doing this and the running back has the Mike linebacker, you have the Sam linebacker, and he draws up a little blitz, they want to see how quickly you can conceptualize that concept and if you can adjust things on a chalkboard. And I remember them doing that to me, and I was able to handle it. So a lot of guys want to see if you can grasp it mentally. Because if you're talking these, high-rated draft picks, these guys that are, projected in the first, second round, they're gifted athletically. So nothing that they're going to be able to do, they're not going to be able to do anything on the field that's going to, I don't think, in my opinion, make or break them. But it's going to be somebody that wows you in the meeting rooms and the interviews, and does what they're expected to do on the field, put up a good bench press, run and look good, look athletic, look quick, and play with low shoulders and good bend in the knee. And these guys go crazy for long arms, and that was a big knock on me. But I just look, if I'm a fan and I'm thinking, tackle, I'm looking at a guy, and when they show the little clips of him from his college career, you want to see somebody nasty. You want to see somebody that's, really holding guys out and squeezing hard when they're pass protecting and having good technique and leverage in the run game, because that's what everyone's looking for.
John, we appreciate the time today. I love talking to you as always, and appreciate hearing about the experiences and what you went through. And it's definitely an intimidating time for a 21, 22-year-old, young adult coming up and hopefully trying to make a career out of playing in the National Football League. And few get to do it. You were one of them, and we appreciate the time as always. And we'll definitely be talking with you a little bit closer to the draft and hearing you on Cleveland Browns Daily during the month of March. And again, around the draft time as well. I think you'll be part of our draft coverage, so we're looking forward to it, and we appreciate your time today.
I I appreciate that, guys. It's good to talk with you again, and I look forward to being up there in Abrea again.
All right, John, take care. Special thanks to John Greco for his time. Always some good stories. I know Gerard Cherry at ESPN Cleveland had a great story about the combine. He had a terrible combine. It cost him a first-round grade, and he dropped to the second round simply because he had a roommate that snored nonstop for 3 straight days, and he could not sleep at all. He ended up sleeping like in the hallway. And so it's always interesting to see how that goes, because from the moment you touch down in Indianapolis, you are on the clock, and it's a whirlwind, and the next thing you know, you're on a plane back home.
Yeah, it's interesting. Two of the best players in this team had the most opposite combine experiences. One being Myles Garrett, went there and just blew everyone out of the water with his just crazy athleticism. Number 1 pick, locked it down. Jarvis Landry was a hugely productive wide receiver at LSU. Thought he might be going in the first round. Ran a bad 40, ended up going late in the second round. And it's crazy because it obviously was so meaningless. He's had a great career, most receptions ever by a player in their first 6 years in their career. But that's where that's why we pay so much attention to the combine, because it does have an effect on where you end up going. And remember last year, DK Metcalf, everyone thought he had that amazing combine, but then it was shown that his quickness wasn't all that good, and he goes late second round.
Yeah, exactly. And a shirtless Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Set the trend. And I can't ever get that visual out of my head. All right, that's going to wrap up our Combine preview. We hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we come to you live from Indianapolis. We'll have a number of guests lined up, and maybe we bring you more than one. Maybe there's a little bonus, podcast thrown in at some point. Depending on time. Everything depends on what's going on with the schedule and people's availability. So we are looking forward to coming to you live from Indianapolis next week and the 2020 NFL Combine. I want to thank Mike Priefer for his time. I want to thank John Greco for his time. For Andrew Gribble, I'm Jason Gibbs. Make sure you log on to clevelandbrowns.com or wherever you get your podcast. Catch up on all of our draft podcasts, otherwise known as the best podcast available. We've had Kevin Stefanski on. We've had Matt Miller from the Bleacher Report, draft guru, and sure to come, a number of other people as we count down to April 23rd. It's 23rd, right?
Yeah, I just know.
Sure.
It's a late Thursday.
It's like the last Thursday in April. I know what I'm doing.
We'll get there.
Not really. Yeah, it's April 23rd. I knew I had that right. All right, we'll take the victory lap. For Andrew Gribble, I'm Jason Gibbs. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to the best podcast available.